Hello, my name is John Sobieski, and I represent a group called Truth Crusaders. It's a topsy-turvy world we live in, rent by the dual negative influences of moral relativism and its illegitimate cousin, political correctness. In just such a world turned upside down, a new catchphrase has caught on. Truth is the new hate speech. In accordance with those tyrannical philosophies of self-censorship, oftentimes good, honest men of integrity suffer the besmirching of their reputations by the practitioners of these twin threats to our freedom of speech. There is one group that has raised political character assassination to a high art form. They went after Mitt Romney for having spoken with a moderate Muslim, Mr. Walid Faris, and they have gone after Representative Joe Walsh for having spoken openly and honestly about the domestic jihadi terrorist threat. I will speak more on that group momentarily. Representative Joe Walsh is running for re-election in the 8th Congressional District in Illinois. Mr. Walsh is also a key member of the House Homeland Security Committee. As such, he knows exactly what he's talking about, since he has had a raised profile at the hearings Representative Peter King has recently chaired, especially the last hearing on the homegrown domestic security threat. In that capacity, Representative Walsh gave a campaign speech where he noted that we are still worried about the homegrown domestic jihadi terrorist threat. He was criticized by people, but his spokesman came out and buttressed his arguments after Mr. Walsh refused to back down. His spokesman stated that there have been over 40 jihadist terrorist plots uncovered since 9/11. That's an average of 4 per year, 1 every 3 months, for 10 consecutive years. His spokesman also later paraphrased what the Attorney General said. The growing threat of Americans being radicalized is what keeps me awake at night. I know Joe Walsh. I've met him and spoken candidly with him. He is a solid citizen, loyal, true, and is an honest man of integrity who keeps his word. What's more, he is that rare breed of politician who believes in and trusts his constituents and the American people. He has told the truth and alerted the American people to the dangers of the homegrown domestic jihadi terrorist threat. We used to call that refreshing candor. In closing in the speech he gave that night, he stated, quote, "We cannot let political correctness blind us to reality. While most Muslims in America and around the world are as peace-loving as the rest of us, we would be foolish to ignore the fact that there is a radical minority that simply wants to destroy America and the values that we stand for." Mr. Walsh has told the truth and had his reputation assailed. What kind of a group would assassinate a man's character for telling the truth? The same group who questions the logic of Mr. Romney conversing with a moderate Muslim. It makes you wonder just what the motives of a group like the Council on American-Islamic Relations might be. Now, I've done some research on CAIR, the Council on American-Islamic Relations, CAIR, and I've discovered a few things about the way they operate and who they operate with. They have a playbook, a game plan that they operate off of, and it's worked pretty well for them as of late. Anytime there's a terrorist threat uncovered or a terrorist plot that is successful, they roll out the wheels of propaganda and start beating the drums of lies. They start talking about the warnings, declarations, and laments about how Islamophobia is ever on the rise and that hate crimes are constantly perpetrated against Muslims. You've got to leave it to CAIR to exploit a Muslim terrorist attack to claim the mantle of victimhood. Now, there are many reasons to doubt CAIR's sincerity and veracity in these claims. First of all, CAIR provides no evidence, no facts, no studies to support their claims. Not one single example is ever cited. Why is that? Because there are none to cite. In so doing, you, CAIR, purposely, willfully stain the reputation of America by attributing non-existent hate crimes to Americans with no foundation in truth. The state of New York recently released their latest figures on hate crimes for the year 2009. There were 251 documented hate crimes against Jews and a minuscule 11 perpetrated against Muslims. You can count them on 2 hands. The numbers for 2010 were very little different. The FBI released their latest statistics that showed 72% of all documented hate crimes were perpetrated against Jews. In a country that claims to be 80 to 85% Christian, another 12% of those hate crimes were perpetrated against Christians. A scant 7.8% of hate crimes were logged against Muslims, rendering their complaints into an almost insignificant statistical category. Now, of course, perhaps more cases might be discovered if CAIR itself didn't vigorously promote an active campaign to discourage all Muslim cooperation with every level of law enforcement in the USA. It seems to me that Muslim immigrants should be more than willing to cooperate with law enforcement authorities rather than undermine our civil law. If your constituents are law-abiding, they should have no qualms whatever about cooperating with law enforcement authorities, right? Unless CARE has an ulterior motive. But really, if CARE had any sincere interest at all in seeing hate crimes reduced, they could start by working to minimize hate crimes against Jews. Of course, those of us in the know understand that CARE would never advance that agenda. They only intend to shrilly trumpet falsehoods about hate crimes where no hatred exists, thus slandering all law-abiding Americans. Now that brings me to the next reason to disbelieve all CARE propaganda, which is their perversion of the definitions of 3 English words which must stop, starting with Islamophobia. Now, a phobia can generally be defined as an irrational or exaggerated fear of something that largely doesn't exist. Well, Islam, as practiced according to the dictates of Sharia law and so defined by Muslims themselves, truly exists, and is anathema to anyone who believes in freedom and the American form of government. Creeping Sharia law setting judicial precedents would virtually legalize separate Muslim statelets, sovereign unto themselves, which might be what CARE truly wants. The threat to America from Sharia law certainly exists. Therefore, one can't have a phobia of it, but rather a healthy skepticism of Islam's intentions. Rather, it is common sense that every American should protect themselves and have a right to self-defense against an ideology that, to paraphrase their own words, wants to destroy America from within. That is exactly the kind of information Joe Walsh is trying to provide us with. The second word that they misuse and abuse is racism. This goes hand in hand with the CARE desire to define terms in such a way that criticism of Islam is racism. Of course, racism is a hot-button issue in this country, and a shameless CARE has no compunction whatever in fraudulently playing that card. If Islam is a faith, as you say, and not a mere group of people, then, simply put, one cannot be racist against it. The third word they abuse and misuse is blasphemy. Muslims incessantly assert that Muhammad was a man, not a god. Since blasphemy can only be applied to a divinity and not a man or a religion, as we so define in the English language, which is what we are truly concerned with here, their claims have no moral clarity, no moral validity, and no basis in definition. From here on out, all Americans must join together and insist that Muslims may not misuse, abuse, or pervert the English language regarding the terms Islamophobia, racism, and blasphemy. Once these terms are used, it will automatically be a signal that you, CARE, are spreading your own hate speech. You have no right to create your own definitions, and you certainly don't have the right to create your own facts. The third, and perhaps most important reason to further discredit CARE is the fact that they were an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation trial that took place in Texas a few years ago. This was the largest terrorist funding trial to ever take place on American soil. CARE, therefore, is guilty of laundering money to and for Hamas, the terrorist organization ruling the Gaza Strip with a totalitarian grip. Every group affiliated with CARE is suspect in this crime. At least 12 of CARE's past leaders and officers have all been openly linked to violent jihad and crimes against humanity. They have been revealed to be a front for terrorist organizations with links to the Muslim Brotherhood, the group considered by Muslims themselves to be the spiritual godfather of Al-Qaeda. Again, the common thread of working to fund terrorism for our country and the non-cooperation with all law enforcement authorities and attempting to ram Sharia law into our secular civil law system all point to subversion of the Constitution and our rule of law. Consequently, CARE, no one believes you. You, CARE, are a sponsor for terror and an apologist for mass murderers. None of what CARE says bears any resemblance to the truth. Every lie they tell drips with the blood of their terror victims. Hopefully, it is only a matter of time before you are shut down permanently and salt is sown in your garden of hate. This is John Sobieski signing off with a shout out to the 3%ers and vote for Joe Walsh. If you vote for security and safety, Joe Walsh is your man. Thank you very much.